In 1943, a young boy, maybe 2 or 3 years old, was found wandering alone in the Nazi-run ghetto in Warsaw, Poland. He was picked up by somebody, history doesn't really know who, maybe a police officer, and put in a rucksack and smuggled out of the ghetto. And he was taken to a Catholic institution in southern Poland where he was cared for with a group of other orphans for a number of years. After a few years, a Polish Jew named Lena Kuchler-Silberman came and took some of the children, along with some other children orphaned by the war that she had found, and she immigrated with them to a number of different places, but finally took a number of them to Israel. And I think we've got a photo here of Shalom as a boy. Originally a black and white photo. This has been colorized. And he lived in northern Israel and worked on trucks for his whole life. And this is a photo of him at 83 years old. Shalom Kore. In the summer of 2023, Kore was approached by researchers asking if he would contribute some DNA to a research project that was trying to trace the lineage of children who had been orphaned due to the Holocaust. And after he contributed his DNA to this research project, shockingly, the DNA returned a match against general ancestry data that had been compiled in other databases, and a second cousin of his was found, named Ann Medine Hellman, who's living in South Carolina. And it was discovered that Ann's grandfather had emigrated to the U.S. in 1893, but he had a brother who had stayed behind in Europe who is almost certainly Shalom's grandfather. And so after 81 years, this survivor who was orphaned by the Holocaust had found his family. Anne and her family commenting on the shock of seeing the similarity in the photos when they finally saw him, said this: "When the picture came through, my husband and I said, 'That's my brother.' We have all thought that this branch of the family was wiped out. Finding Shalom is a miracle." They haven't had the chance to meet in person yet, but Anne says that Shalom has a big hug waiting for him when they do. Why do we find this story valuable? Right? Why did I know, putting this story together, that when I said, after 81 years, this survivor, orphaned by the Holocaust, had found his family, why did I know that you all were going to respond in the way that you did? Why do we find this valuable? Family and the finding of family. I could tell a lot of other stories about finding different things, and you wouldn't have responded in the same way. But there's something about family that we recognize immediately and perceive immediately as valuable. Why do we perceive family immediately as valuable? Especially when, if we're really honest, so often our experience of family is opposite than that sound you all just made. You all went, oh. And so often our experience of family is not that. So often our experience of family is a source of significant pain and difficulty and loss and loneliness and isolation. And yet somehow, even against the backdrop of that whole lingering painful experience, we hear a story about someone finding their family and we immediately recognize it as valuable. Why is that? Why do we have a longing for family? Why do we recognize that family is valuable? Why do we value it so highly, and how can we have healthier relationships with our family members? What does God have to say about my family? These are some of the questions that we're going to be asking today. We're in the middle of a sermon series called Can't We All Just Get Along?, where we're looking at biblical wisdom for forming and keeping quality relationships. We have been looking at a couple different topics in the past 2 weeks, and starting last week, we sort of began to move in, not just talking about relationships broadly, but zeroing in on specific relationships that we have in our lives and looking for biblical wisdom in that relationship specifically. So last week, we looked at biblical wisdom for relationships in community, that relationships in community have a particular dynamic to them and that we need to learn about them. This week, we're looking at relationships in family. So I've titled today's sermon, Can't My Family Just Get Along? Our text today is going to be Genesis chapter 50, verses 15 to 21. If you have a Bible or a device, I'd encourage you to flip to it. Genesis is the first book of the Bible, easy to find. Again, Genesis chapter 50, verses 15 to 21 is our text today. I'll read the text aloud. When Joseph's brothers saw that their father was dead, they said, "It may be that Joseph will hate us and pay us back for all the evil that we did to him." I'm a much better reader than that guy. Yeah. So they sent a message to Joseph saying, "Your father gave this command before he died. Say to Joseph, 'Please forgive the transgression of your brothers and their sin, because they did evil to you. And now, please forgive the transgression of the servants of the God of your father.'" Joseph wept when they spoke to him. His brothers also came and fell down before him and said, "Behold, we are your servants." But Joseph said to them, "Do not fear, for am I in the place of God? As for you, you meant evil against me, but God meant it for good, to bring it about that many people should be kept alive as they are today. So do not fear, I will provide for you and your little ones." Thus he comforted them and spoke kindly to them. We all want to be part of a family, and here in the last verse of our text today, we see a picture of dynamics that are present in a warm, loving, healthy family. So in verse 21, the text says, "Do not fear, I will provide for you and your little ones." Thus he comforted them and spoke kindly for them. And we see at least three dynamics present in this verse that we would want to see in families. First of all, it's a relationship where there's no fear. It's a relationship where, because we belong in a family, we don't have to be afraid, which is an interesting thing because if you think about it, there are many different types of relationships that you have in the world, and some of those relationships are predicated on maybe I need to be afraid. Maybe I need to be afraid of not jumping over some bar, and so someone's going to have an exacting judgmental standard over me. Or maybe our relationship between me and this stranger is sort of so thin that I don't know, I need to be cautious. Who knows? We have different relationships in the world, and sometimes those relationships have some part of trepidation with them. But a family is a place where we are supposed to have no fear. We're not supposed to be afraid in a family. It's a place of provision just because. Joseph says, "I will provide for you and your little ones." Joseph is in a position where he has a number of means available to him. He's in a very high-ranking role in a large empire, and he chooses to use that role to leverage it to provide for his family. And there's more backstory coming about Joseph's family, but all you need to know right now is Joseph's family certainly hasn't earned the provision that he's giving to them. In fact, they've done quite the opposite, right? Joseph's family has not earned it. Specifically, like his brothers, have really not earned it. But even like he says, "I'll provide for your little ones." The whole point of providing for kids is that they haven't earned it. They're just taking all the time. It's what they do. And we provide for them, and it's because they're part of our family. And family is a particular relational context where you don't need to be afraid and where you should know I'm going to receive some provision just because I belong here. And finally, families ideally are a place of a particular kind of speech. The text says, "Then he comforted them, and he spoke kindly to them." And the Hebrew here for "spoke kindly to them" is literally, "and he spoke to their hearts." A family ideally is a place of a particular kind of speech where regardless of how people are speaking to one another in the world, and regardless of the kinds of things that people say to us and about us in the world, that a family is a place where we can show up and people will speak comfort to one another and we will feel like our heart is being spoken to. Not just our minds, not just our ears, we're not just thinking about things together, but our hearts are in dialogue with one another in a family. These relational elements where we don't need to be afraid, where we're provided for just because, and where speech to one another is comforting and it's to the hearts, are not necessarily present in every relationship. Even in other relationships where they're present in smaller doses, not every relationship is built around these relational elements. But there's one kind of relationship that is, and that's a relationship of a family, a familial relationship. Family is about telling us who we are, where we come from, why it matters, and ideally, why that will never change, no matter what happens to us or to our family in this life. The experience of being part of a family is something that we all long for. We all long to know that there's just one, even just one relational context in the world where I don't have to be afraid. Where no matter what happens, what I do right, what I do wrong, and no matter what's going wrong in the lives of those other people, that it's not going to go so wrong in their lives that they are going to harm me or make me need to be afraid of them. And we long to show up in a relational context where people just settle and we're able to have no fear with one another. We long to be in a place where we're provided for. Maybe not all the time for our whole lives where you just show up and say, provide for me. But that place where you can just show up and know, like, I don't have to take care of dinner tonight because somebody else is. Wow, yay, amazing. Or something, right? And obviously, if you're part of a family, sometimes that goes the other way and you provide for someone else. But where that provision is not based on anything you did, it's not based on having some incredible plan, it's based on being able to receive it because I'm part of this family. And finally, we long to be part of a relational context where people are just speaking life to one another. So much of what's going on in our minds, in our thought patterns, in our moods, in our dispositions is inextricably bound up to the way that we speak to one another. And the world is a place of deadly, caustic, acidic speech where we are just tearing each other down in the way that we speak over and over again. And we're longing, aren't we, to just have one relational context. It's not that we would never say something hard to one another, something challenging, but that the majority of our speech patterns to one another are life-giving speech, where we speak to one another's heart and we comfort each other. We all long to be part of this. And God, who knows our longings and knows our needs, who wants us to be without fear, who wants us to know and feel provision and to feel provided for, and who himself wants to speak to our hearts. The God who sees and cares about all of those things knows your longing and need for a family. And so he created you, he created us in a way where we would be born and we would be born into a family. We all are born into a family. We come into being in a family. We're born into a family. Some of us are adopted into a family. But God made humans work in such a way that everyone would be provided for in a family. And ideally, at their best, we experience those things in our families. We at times can experience warmth and love. We experience siblings who support us and we're cheerleaders for one another. We experience help when we need it and challenge that's balanced with encouragement. All of these things. And families are places where we belong. So, cool. Sermon over. Problem solved. We long to belong in a family. Families are the place where all these wonderful relational dynamics happen. And God purposed that all of us would get a family. Wonderful. Problem solved. Incredible. Why are our families so often not like verse 21 of Genesis chapter 50? Our families are supposed to be this place that God has given us to experience these specific relational dynamics that we so often cannot find in the world. And yet over and over and over again, it feels like our families are not the place to go to find those things. What's wrong with our family? And if we long to be part of a family, how can we possibly be part of a family that is constantly failing us? We long to be part of a family, but how can we when our families are constantly falling short of what a family should actually be? Joseph's family failed him really hard. Joseph's family really, really failed him. The failure that Joseph experienced in his family, it's like he didn't even have a chance to avoid it. The conflicts that led his family to the kind of treatment that Joseph received was set generations before Joseph even entered into the world. I've got a little slide here where I just laid out for you at least 4 layers of relational conflict that are present before we even get to what happened to Joseph. In verse In verse 15, right, his brothers are concerned. It may be that Joseph will hate us and pay us back for all the evil we did to him. What evil are they talking about, and how did they get there? Joseph's dad is a guy named Jacob. Jacob's dad's a guy named Isaac. Isaac's married to his wife, Rebekah. And when Isaac and Rebekah had their sons, they were twins. They came out one right after another, and it set off a toxic sibling rivalry that governed their whole life. And not only was there a toxic sibling rivalry going on, but the parents had favorites in the toxic sibling rivalry. And in particular, Jacob's mom in particular preferred Jacob to Esau. And so the parents have a vested interest in how this toxic sibling rivalry plays out. And Jacob, even though he's the younger, even though Esau is like the stronger one, in every other ancient Near Eastern culture and story, Esau would have been the winner of the sibling rivalry. But Jacob, the youngest, finds a way to win. And he finds his way to win primarily through developing in himself the trait of deception. And deception as a character trait that he brings into his relationship. So Jacob learns deception in his toxic sibling rivalry with his brother Esau, and then, unsurprisingly, the problems of that character flaw begin to follow him in his life. So after Jacob wins in his toxic sibling rivalry, Esau goes, "You may have won, but I'm going to kill you." Spoiler alert, I'm going to kill you. And so Jacob runs away. And he runs away to his uncle Laban, who's a total jerk. And Uncle Laban goes, "Well, this Jacob is a deceiver. Wouldn't it be fun if I out-deceived the deceiver? Wouldn't it be fun if I out-tricked the trickster? Yeah, I'm going to get him." And so they get into this toxic who can trick who harder conflict. And Jacob shows up to Laban and is like, "Hey, I'm in love with your younger daughter, Rachel." And he's like, "Perfect, work for me for 5 years and I'll give your hand in marriage." And they go to get married and they consummate the wedding. They wake up and boom, wow, Laban had given him the older daughter instead of the younger daughter. Tricked ya? Cool. And Jacob goes back to Laban and is like, what are you doing? And Laban says, "Oh, sorry. Gotcha. If you work for me for 7 more years, you can have the wife that you really wanted to marry." And so now Jacob is tricked. His character flaw becomes something that comes back to bite him. And now he's tricked into marrying sisters. He wanted to marry one woman. Now he's married to 2, who then start their own toxic sibling rivalry because now they spend the rest of their lives competing for who has more of the husband's love and who's going to give our husband more kids. And like, if we were to dive into the names of the children, I mean, they're sad. Like the names of the first 6 kids are like, "Now my husband will finally love me because I gave him a son." Like, that's their name. It's like a Hebrew form of that name. It's like, "Hi, wow, what a precious," it's like, you're not named for something about you or something we think God's, "Now my husband will finally love me." And so this conflict is just in everyone in their family. And Leah and Rachel then give birth to sons who are born into it. And so they wake up going, "Oh my gosh," everyone wonders who's the favorite. And the kids who are born of the preferred wife or the preferred kids, in particular, the oldest son. And that's Joseph. Joseph is the oldest son of the preferred spouse. And so all his other brothers hate him. And it's like, there was, what chance did Joseph have? Right? There's all the generations of family conflict that lead to this situation. What chance did he actually have of that conflict going any differently than it ultimately did? Joseph's brothers, once this conflict boils over, at first they plan to kill Joseph. Some of you know the story, right? They set out to kill him. Basically, they kidnap him and set out to kill him. And then one of the brothers says, "How about we just kidnap him? Let's not kill him. Let's just kidnap him." And then another brother says, "How about we kidnap him and sell him into slavery? That's what we'll do. That's the way to handle this." And so that's what they do. They kidnap Joseph. They sell him into slavery, right? So they're planning to kill him. They're kidnapping him. There's physical violence there. His family is not a physically safe place for him. They exploit him. His family becomes an exploitative place where Joseph shows up and they're like, "Hey, what can we get out of you?" "Well, we can get money out of you." Perfect. And of course, his brothers take on this deceptive pattern that Jacob had when they go to Jacob and lie to their father about what happened to Joseph. So there are physical things, evil actions that they do. That's part of this evil that they did to Joseph. And then, because they're doing these evil actions, they learn evil and disingenuous patterns of speech. So in the story, for example, they go and they lie about what happened, but we see a wonderful example of their disingenuous speech right here in our text today, in verses 16 to 17. This is what the text says. "So they sent a messenger to Joseph, saying, your father gave this command before he died. Say to Joseph, please forgive the transgression of your brothers and their sin. And now please forgive the transgression, da-da-da. Joseph wept when they spoke to him. Right? Joseph knows. The text specifically says Joseph wept when they spoke to him. Not Joseph wept when he got this message from his father, because Joseph knows that this is made up. His dad didn't really say this. His brothers are afraid of how Joseph is going to respond now that their dad has passed away because of this long conflict that they've had. And so they lie and make up a message and say, by the way, before our dad died, he said, please, please, please don't hurt your brothers. And Joseph is like, yeah, I know that dad didn't say that. You guys are saying that. So they put fake speech in the mouth of their recently deceased father. Joseph's family relationships are wrapped up in evil actions and evil patterns of speech. And the problem with this is that these things destroy the nature of a family relationship. These things destroy families. Look at what his brothers say to him in Genesis 50:18. His brothers then came to him. When they gave the hard message, they didn't have the courage to come in person. Right? They sent it through a messenger. Right? Degrees of separation from the hard conversation. They sent it through a messenger. But finally, after he's gotten the message, and they're hoping that the lie has shielded them, they show up in person and they say, his brothers also came and fell down before him and said, behold, we are your servants. Okay, a servant is not a familial relationship, right? They even acknowledge that we're not family anymore. The actions that we've done, the way that we're speaking to one another, has so eroded our relationships that we are not your brothers, we are not your family. We maybe talk about a family at a distance, about like how we share a father or something, but let's be clear, we are your servants. The familial relationship has been shattered. And this is what all of the failures of our families do. They break by degrees, sometimes in small ways, sometimes in big ways, the nature of our family and what our family was called to be. The real problem with this is that, in Joseph's situation, these things that have shattered his family relationships are egregious things. They're really, really big things. But we know that the good of a family is so high. Like our longing for it is so intense. And our hopes for what it will be are so grand that when even the smallest thing goes wrong, when even we're let down one time, it can feel like a huge shattering of what we thought our family was. Right? Even those of us who have been blessed to generally be part of a good, warm, loving, earthly family, we know that someone only has to say a truly hurtful and biting and caustic remark one time for it to make us go, gosh, that changed my view of my family. Someone only has to break a promise they made to us one time for us to go, gosh, I thought this was a place where we kept our promises. Someone only has to prove to be physically unsafe one time before it changes our view of what our family is. How can we be part of a family when our families are being destroyed by evil actions and evil speech, even in the best of families when they happen just a handful of times, and it erodes our feeling of the family that we're in? Look, we all had or have longings for what our family would be like. I was talking to a friend once about this, about longings they had for their family, and they grew up in a particularly challenging family environment. And they shared with me that every holiday season, they would be sitting on the floor watching TV, and they'd be watching these holiday movies that have these perfect families in all these holiday movies. All these families who are sitting around the table and cutting up the food and saying nice things to one another. And they just said, as a kid, they had a burning desire watching those movies and comparing it to their experience. They longed to be part of the family that they were seeing in the TV screen. Longed with everything they had to be part of a family like that. And all of us have longings like that with our families. We all have things that we were longing for in our families, ways that we would belong, ways that we would feel like just dynamics that we wanted present, conversations with certain people that we wish were easier. I wish my family could talk to each other easier, right? Maybe you think that. Dynamics that we wish were there. Maybe you were just like, I was really hoping for certain constellation of siblings. When I was a kid, my mom was pregnant, and I was like, I really hope it's a boy. I hope I get a brother. And my older sister was like, I really hope that it is a girl. I hope I get a sister. And like, it was a girl. And I have a wonderful little sister. She's been here at the church. She's incredible. I wouldn't trade her for anything. But of course, you go through that in your experience of your family. Where you're like, I was really hoping it would turn out this way, and it turned out differently. Right? Even things that end up being good can turn out differently from what you long for in your family. And this, again, is reality in very difficult family situations, but it's reality even for those of us who have been blessed with really good families, with parents who really wanted to get it right, with parents who wanted to encourage us and support us, with siblings who cared about our relationships, and yet, no matter what, even for those of us who would say, I have been blessed with a good earthly family, we still are hurt and let down and left feeling lonely and isolated when our family inevitably fails us because nobody gets it right all the time. No family is able to constantly get it right. And so these actions and words, they erode the nature of our family, and then we're left asking, what is there left for me to be a part of? I want to be part of a family, but my family is just wrecked by these things that have happened, by the ways we talk to one another, and by the things that we do. What is there left to belong to when that's happening to our families? How can we be part of a family when our families are constantly failing us? You know, Joseph, in verse 21, the sort of verse I use to talk about good dynamics that are present in a family, Joseph is the one who's like making all those dynamics happen. And yet Joseph is the one who received all the worst treatment of his family that we looked at in verses 15 to 18. So where on earth is Joseph getting the ability to treat his failed, broken, terrible, abusive family as though it's a family that he could belong in? Joseph is treating his family as though he's part of something. And yet we just saw that he's been treated in all these ways that have shattered the relationships in his family. How does Joseph do that? Where is he getting the ability to do that? This is what Joseph says in verses 19 to 20 of our text. His response to his brother's deceptive message. He says this. He says, "Do not fear, for am I in the place of God? As for you, you meant evil against me, but God meant it for good, to bring it about that many people should be kept alive as they are today." What if being part of a family isn't about what our family got right or wrong? What if being part of a family is about believing that God will get it right in my family, even in the places where my family has really gotten it wrong? In this passage, Joseph finds a new basis for being part of his family, and it's not the basis of, my family got all this stuff right, and my family never hurt me, and my family never abandoned me, and my family never left me with any wounds. My family only got everything right, and so that's why I'm part of this family. Joseph finds a new basis. His basis for belonging in his family is not that his family has never failed, but that he believes that God will not fail his family, no matter what his family has gotten right or wrong. When Joseph says, "Am I in the place of God? As for me, you meant evil against me, but God meant it for good," what he's saying is that we are still family, and we're still part of this family with one another because God took the ways that you failed and turned them into something good in the life of this family. It isn't that it didn't hurt. It isn't that there's no cost. It isn't that he's sweeping over the emotions or the pain. It isn't that there's not hard conversations to have. But when it comes down to, am I a part of this family? Joseph finds a new and deeper basis that's not built on whether or not his family got things right or wrong. It's built on whether or not God is going to get it right in the specificity of his family story. We can be part of a family not because our family makes it easy all the time, not because our family gets everything right, but because we believe that God has given me this family and that he hasn't given up on it. And so I'm not going to either. When we believe this like Joseph did, we not only gain new power to be part of our families, even when our families fail, but we also gain a promise from God that all of our earthly families are signs and becoming signs of the heavenly family that God is making. Because our earthly families are part the promise of what family can be and part pain of the ways that our families fail to live up to that expectation. But God's heavenly family is all promise. God is making a heavenly family born out of his son Jesus that is all the promise of what family should be. And the Bible uses like every single familial metaphor that can possibly be used to talk about the idea that God is inviting you through faith in Jesus into this heavenly family. The Bible says that you are born into God's family. The Bible says that you are adopted into God's family. The Bible says that God is your father. The Bible says that Jesus is your sibling. The Bible is very invested in letting you know that your earthly family is a sign of the heavenly family that God is inviting you into. Ephesians chapter 3, verse 14 says, "For this reason I kneel before the Father, from whom every family on heaven and on earth derives its name." That all of our families are ultimately signs, even in their failures, because God hasn't given up on them, of the heavenly family that God is making. And it's interesting, because Jesus is part of this family as well. And this heavenly family that God is making, where God is offering belonging in that family to all people, has not treated Jesus all that well. Like Jesus didn't have a great sojourn on earth when he was around the people who are going to become part of his heavenly family. It's not like most people said, "Oh my gosh, we're family." They were like, "Get away from me, and we might try to hurt you." Like, why would Jesus choose to remain part of this family? Jesus chooses to remain part of this family for the exact same reason that Joseph did. Because Jesus belonging in the family of God that God invites us into is not predicated on all of the things that we got right. It's predicated on the work that God is doing through Jesus in the family. Hebrews chapter 2, verse 11 says this, "Both the one who makes people holy and those who are made holy are of the same family. So Jesus is not ashamed to call them brothers and sisters." Jesus is not ashamed to call you family, not because of who you already are, but because of who you are being made into. Those who are made holy are of the same family. Jesus is not ashamed to call you his brother or his sister because he believes in what God is doing in you. Not because of what you already got right. Jesus remains part of the family of God, not because it's perfect, but because he says, "This is my family that God gave to me, and I believe in what God is doing in it." And if Jesus believes in what God is doing in his family, you should believe in what God is doing in yours. And I know that we have people in this room who have had some really rough family experiences. And I know that we have people in this room who have had really overall pretty good family experiences, and yet we still at times feel lonely and estranged and hurt in our families. And so it's very tempting to just give up faith on our earthly families. And it's very tempting to go, "You know what? We're learning so much in the world about how to have healthy relationships and how to be part of a healthy family that my family just needed to jump over this bar of health in order for me to be part of it." And I want to say to you today, you should learn about how to be healthy in your family. You should be trying to learn and grow up yourself so that you can inject relational and emotional health into your family. We're doing that in this course. That's why we're learning it. But at the end of the day, your belonging in your family is not about how relationally healthy your family is. It isn't. Because the family of God isn't about that. The family of God is believing in what God is doing in this family. And you should believe in what God is doing in your family. Because God isn't done. God believes in what he's doing in your family. We don't know the whole story of our families. The opinion that we have about our family is built on important data. Our experience of our family, what we know to be true. But there's a larger story here. There's a larger story that begins in generations before you, and it's going to be finished in generations after you. And it's our job not to pretend like our families aren't places of pain, not to pretend like we haven't been wounded or hurt, not to say, I want something different and better for my family in the way that they interact. All those things are good and important things. But at the end of the day, we belong in our families because they're ours, because they're the place that God has put us. And we believe that God's not done with our family. And you should believe that God is not done in your family. I want to challenge you today. If you believed this, if you believed that God is not done with your earthly family, and that your earthly family is a sign of God's family, and Jesus is part of that family because he believes that God's not done with that family. If you believe those things would become strength and power in your life to be part of your family even when they fail you. Our families need people, maybe even just one person, who will show up to our family and who will have power to be a kind, loving, faithful force in our family because we believe that God isn't done. When people show up for their families in this way, it can become healing for our families in at least 3 ways. First, people who show up for their families in this way, where I'm going to be here even when you fail me. People who show up for their family in this way free their family from the pain of feeling like they failed. So often our families, especially when things are not going well, are sitting under the burden and the pain of feeling like they failed. So many things are unsaid in our families because deep down people feel racked with guilt over the ways that we failed one another. Not every time, not every conflict, but so often families are terrified to talk about things that they need to in their family because they're afraid that the verdict is going to be, we failed and we got that wrong and we can't get the time back. You know what would free a family from that straitjacket? If someone showed up and said, no matter where this conversation is going, no matter what we got right or got wrong, I'm here because I believe in what God is doing here. And so I love you, and I have strength from my own faith to be present with this family, even if the verdict is that we failed. We fail. It's inevitable. And participation in our families that's built on our families getting everything right will inevitably lead to people participating in our earthly families less and less and less. Somebody's got to get strength from somewhere to show up in our families and say, I'm not covering over the things we gotten wrong. But if the verdict is that we failed in this season of life, we failed in the way we treated that person, we failed in the way we hid that conflict, if that's the verdict, I'm not going anywhere because I believe in what God is doing in my family. The second way that this would be healing for families is related. People who show up for their families in this way free their family from the need to pretend that they're perfect. Sometimes families are invested in a myth of their own goodness and perfection. Maybe you're in a family that has propped up this myth. Maybe you've been adjacent to a family that's like this. And the only way the family is sort of implicitly allowed to talk about one another is to say how great the family is. We're a great family. Our family's super close. Oh my gosh, we're so close. We're so great. We're so lucky that we've got a good family. Nobody else is a good. And you've maybe seen a family like this. And we just talk all the time about how good we are. And you're like, Thou doth protest too much. Like, what are we hiding? Why are we talking all the time and building this up for ourselves about how great we did this whole family thing? In those situations, so often what is really needed is some honesty about a family like that. There's strengths, of course, but also weaknesses and pains. Families that are clinging to a myth of their own perfection can't handle honesty because they're afraid that once they start being honest about things they got wrong, the whole thing is going to come crumbling down. And if there were even one person who were just able to show up and say, listen, I can talk about the things that weren't perfect here because there's nothing that I can learn that would make me run away from this family. That would just unlock the whole thing. The whole thing would begin to be unlocked. And your family, that family, would begin to move in little baby steps into just sharing more honestly about what's actually happening and how they actually felt. And it'll be like small conversations first. They'll test it. They'll be like, okay, well, I'm going to say something hard, and let's see if you run away. And you don't. And then it builds and builds. And finally, you get to something where it's like, oh, my gosh, this is the thing our family really needed to address. This is what we needed to talk about. This is what we needed to be able to live in the reality of. And it begins when just one person shows up and says, listen, I'm not going anywhere no matter what's revealed here. The third way that someone who shows up in this way to their families makes their families stronger is that people who show up for their families in this way are humble enough and strong enough to be first in growing relationally, making our family stronger and healthier and a sign of the heavenly family. Belonging in our families at the end of the day is not about how right we're getting all the relational dynamics. But my God, it's helpful. My goodness, it's helpful. And we want, for those of us who want to grow, we want our families to be more and more healthy and loving and kind and gracious and edifying. But where is our family going to get strength to do all of that? Someone has to lead the way in starting to behave in a new way in our families, in starting to speak in a new way in our families, in starting to do conflict in a new way in our families. Someone has to go first in growing up relationally and emotionally in our families. And people who show up saying, I am getting something from my faith that is the primary way that I'm belonging in my family, those people have strength and power to say, I'll go first. I'll go first in my family to grow up relationally, even if nobody else in my family is going to. I will. I will begin to treat my family differently. I will begin to speak to my family differently. Not putting yourself foolishly in some chronically abusive or painful situation. I'm not talking about, oh my gosh, this person has some seriously unhinged issue and me, belonging in my family is just allowing them to hurt me over and over again. It takes all kinds of wisdom to discern in certain situations what this looks like. But the basic posture is, how can I show up and inject something healthy into my family? And the people who are able to do that are the people who know through faith that they believe in what God is doing in their family, and so they're going to show up and lead the way in being different so that everyone else can learn a new way of being family together. Everyone wants to be part of a family. But when our families fail us, it feels like our ability to be a part of them is ruined. Thanks to God, there is a way to be part of a family that isn't based on how much our families get right or wrong. It's based on believing that God has put me in this family, and that God isn't done working in my family to fulfill his good purposes. And when we do this, we become changed into people who, because we are committed to our families on a deeper level than the things we get right or get wrong, are able to lead the way in injecting new, healthy, godly patterns of relating to one another into our family, and to just be one small step doing my part in my family to see my family changed and transformed into signs of the heavenly family of God, our Father, and his Son, our sibling, Jesus Christ. Amen.